Kristen, did you give an update? Or should I do that?
I did not.
Okay, so we do have a court reporter. She was on the executive session line. She didn't have the regular open public hearing line number, so we're getting her that. Should be, I assume, just a minute. Sorry about that.
Mike, Ms. Dawson is here. She may need a few minutes to set up.
Great, thanks. Yeah. Hi, Ms. Dawson. Just take your time, but let us know when you're ready to go on record and proceed. Thanks.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm just calling in my backup line right now, and I'll be ready shortly. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I'll break the silence just to say good morning, everyone.
Morning, Mike. Good morning. As the healthcare advocate, you just lowered the stress. That was appreciated.
I'm so looking forward to spending the whole day with you all.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. This is Ms. Dawson, the court reporter of record. Whenever you guys are ready, I am ready. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Today's July 22nd. We have, I'll call the Green Mountain Care Board's hearing to order. We have a hearing on MVP's 2027 small group and individual rate filings. I see that the healthcare advocate is here and Mr. Carnady is here. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here. It's good to see you and to engage in this process again. I've designated Michael Barber, our general counsel, as a hearing officer, and I will turn it to him.
Thank you, Chair Foster. Ms. Dawson, just to confirm, are we on the record?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. As the chair said, this is a hearing on MVP Health Plans 2027 individual and small group rate filings. Just for the record, the docket number for the individual filing is GMCB-003-26RR, and the docket number for the small group rate filing is GMCB-004-26RR. The hearing is being held pursuant to 8 VSA section 4026, as well as Green Mountain Care Board Rule 2, section 2.307. We are obviously recording today's hearing. We have a court reporter, as as we've gone over. We'll provide the parties with the transcript as soon as we get that. If there are any members of the public here who are present, we will be taking public comment at the close of the proceedings today. But that is unclear when that will be. So if you're here and you don't want to sit through all the witness testimony today, we are having a meeting on Thursday, July 23rd from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So tomorrow, 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and it's going to be dedicated exclusively to hearing from the public on these rate filings, as well as the filings from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont. Information about how to access that meeting can be found on the Green Mountain Care Board's website, on the board meetings tab. And you can also get that information from the Department of Libraries website. They have a calendar with all the upcoming meetings for all state agencies. Spend a minute talking about binders, just so we're all on the same page going forward. We received binders from MVP on July 16th. Those binders were supplemented several times after that date. So specifically, I think exhibits 28, 29, 39, 40, 41, 42, and 43 were added. And the exhibit list was updated to reflect the addition of those exhibits. So if you're working off a physical binder, it should have 43 exhibits in it. So please let me know if that's not the case for you and we can figure that out. The exhibit list also identifies 6 exhibits, exhibits A through F from the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. Those aren't included in the binders themselves, but hyperlinks to the documents are provided. And I understand that the parties have stipulated to the admissibility of all of these exhibits. Is that accurate, Mr. Carnegie and Mr. Becker?
That's correct. All the exhibits on the exhibit list. So 1 through 43 plus the A through F.
Yep, that's correct. We agree.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and admit those at this time. Just a reminder for everybody that there are several exhibits that contain confidential information. Documents with confidential information in them are identified in the exhibit list. I do think there's a correction to be made here. Exhibit 43, I believe, the exhibit list says it. No, that was corrected. Never mind.
I think we cleaned that up.
Yep, I see that. Thanks.
Well, I think it was corrected, but I'm happy you brought it up just to make sure the board members know if you have questions about exhibit 43, they can be asked in the public session.
Thanks, Laura. The specific materials that have been determined to be confidential within the exhibits it's typically going to have a red box around it, or it's going to be highlighted in blue, or it may say something like entire page confidential, or this is confidential material, or something to that effect. So if you have questions about whether something is or is not, or has, confidential, as we move through the hearing today, please just say so. We can take a few minutes and get that sorted out. If we need to discuss the confidential portions of the record, we'll have to move over to a non-public session to do that. Just so everyone's kind of aware of how we're going to go forward today. At the pre-hearing conference, MVP indicated that they do expect to have some direct testimony from Mr. Bachner on confidential materials, so it's likely we'll have to hop into a non-public session fairly early today. So just so everyone's aware of that. And that's all I had. Does either party have anything to talk about before we move to opening statements?
I don't believe so.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay, then would MVP like to make an opening statement?
Yes, please. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Carnegie, and I again represent MVP in these rate filing proceedings, along with Ryan Long from the Primer Law Firm. The evidence will show that L&E and MVP actuaries are largely in agreement this year, disagreeing only on one of L&E's recommendations regarding bad debt. The evidence will reflect that MVP has updated its rate request since its May filing to reflect information received since that initial filing. First, adopting L&E recommendations. Second, adjusting for the cost of Blueprint, the Vermont Vaccine Purchasing Program, and the Green Mountain Care Board billback expense. And third, including recent budget submissions from the Vermont hospitals. The evidence will show that MVP has reduced its original request for individual from 7.82 to 5.59%. MVP has reduced its original request for small group from 9.14 to 7.67%. The evidence will provide a basis for the board to conclude, as it did last year, that no further cuts to these proposed rates are necessary. The evidence will show that L&E proposed no cuts to MVP CTR in the last 3 years. The board has successfully exercised prudence by not cutting or ordering additional cuts of MVP rates in the last 2 years. Losses have reduced. That said, the evidence will show that great uncertainty remains about the rest of 2026 and 2027. DFR is also concerned about the uncertainty of the market and competition with only 2 carriers and limiting instances of differing treatment, as I'm sure the board is as well. Further cuts might make the rates inadequate. The consensus of the experts and other evidence will show that a CTR of 2% is essential for 2027. The evidence will also show that MVP is continuing to run its Vermont lines of business prudently in comparison to other carriers nationwide, including further reducing administrative costs as a percent of premium from 2025 levels. I would like to provide a roadmap of our presentation this year. The board indicated in its decision last year that MVP fell short of providing enough evidence on some of the statutory criteria. In response to that concern, I'm anticipating that our presentation of evidence will take a bit longer this year. This administrative process has evolved substantially since well over a decade ago when I attended my first Green Mountain Care Board hearing, the first Green Mountain Care Board hearing. In more recent years, the number and depth of pre-hearing written questions from the board and the healthcare advocate have increased substantially. We think this is a good development as it helps us to frame the live testimony around issues of import to you and the HCA. With that in mind, the first part of Mr. Bachner's testimony will provide information on various issues of the day raised by the board, the HCA, and other L&E objection letters that we believe are important to the board. For example, hospital negotiations. This will be a longer day, and we thought it would be best to cover these issues first while we're all still fresh. Some of that evidence will be offered in executive session. The second part of Mr. Bachner's testimony will review and explain the rate filing and rate request as we've done in prior years. All of this evidence from both the first and second part of our presentation will then be compiled by the MVP lawyers and linked to one or more of the various statutory criteria in our briefing. We will also include in briefing information from the rate filings and other exhibits which may not be discussed today, but are in evidence. So for example, if I'm asking Mr. Bachner about a particular piece of information say, an administrative cost fact, I'm not necessarily going to have him then identify each and every criterion it might evidence. That is what we, the lawyers, will do in our briefing. We appreciate your attention to this longer presentation today, in that we will be providing even more evidence this year in support of meeting our burden of the statutory criteria. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll turn to the Office of the Healthcare Advocate.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Barber, Chair Foster, members of the board, representatives of MVP, and everyone participating in today's proceeding. Thank you. My name is Charles Becker. I'm a staff attorney for the Office of the Healthcare Advocate, appearing today on behalf of Vermonters, the individuals, families, and small businesses who pay MVP's premiums and rely on MVP's products for access to care. The HCA approaches these filings with a mix of concern and realism. After several years in which rates in these markets seem to be increasing almost beyond control, there are some signs that pressure may be easing. But for MVP, somewhat ironically, that still means filing higher requested increases this year than last year. MVP's requested increases are not arbitrary, however. They are tied to the underlying cost of care. These rates reflect claims costs, a changing risk pool, state and federal policy changes, administrative costs, and the reserve needs of a carrier participating in a fragile market. And the QHP market is fragile. The expiration of enhanced premium tax credits has already affected enrollment in the individual market, and further federal policy changes will put additional stress on these markets in the years ahead. Whatever one thinks of those federal choices, the practical result is clear. Fewer people are likely to remain covered, healthier members are likely to leave, and the remaining risk pool will become more expensive. Yet these fragile markets matter enormously. They matter to Vermonters who buy coverage for themselves and their families in the individual market. They matter to small businesses trying to offer coverage to employees. And they matter, perhaps most of all, to people with health needs who cannot choose to go without insurance. The board cannot allow these markets to fail. The HCA is not asking the board to underfund MVP, ignore actuarial reality, or approve rates that are inadequate. But the market's fragility does not mean we should not accept, or that we should accept MVP's filed rates without careful scrutiny. And actuarial considerations are only one side of the case. Vermont law does not ask only whether a rate is supported actuarially. It also asks whether the rate is affordable. And the record in this case shows that these rates are not affordable for many Vermonters. The affordability templates make that clear. In the individual market, APTCs help make premiums affordable for Vermonters at or below 400% FPL, but above 400%, the affordability cliff is severe. The templates show that unsubsidized premiums in Vermont's individual market are unaffordable throughout the income range analyzed, and affordability cannot be measured by premium alone. Deductibles and cost sharing matter. A plan that a person can barely afford to purchase may still be unaffordable to use. In the small group market, the picture is more nuanced, but the problem remains. Self-only coverage may look more manageable, but affordability deteriorates for couples and families, and cost sharing and deductibles create serious underinsurance concerns for people with moderate or high healthcare needs. That analysis also does not account for the cost burden on Vermont's small businesses, who typically pay the majority of their employees' premiums. That is the central tension of this case. MVP's rates may be largely explainable by the cost of care, but the resulting premiums are still unaffordable. Pretending the cost of care does not exist will not resolve that tension. The answer is to approve no more than the lowest rates supported by the record, while continuing the broader work of reducing the underlying cost structure that drives these premiums. For that reason, the HCA asks the board to focus on several concrete areas. First, the board should adopt L&E's recommended modifications. Second, and most importantly, the final rates must reflect at least the board's fiscal year 2027 hospital budget guidance. MVP's filing assumed a positive trend for providers subject to the board's hospital budget review, but the board's fiscal year 2027 guidance sets a commercial reimbursement benchmark of -1% for most hospitals. Although the board cannot prejudge individual hospital budget requests, Overall, in the aggregate, the board must find a way to adhere to that guidance, if not go further. And these rate filings must reflect that lower hospital unit cost trend. This is one of the last remaining and most important affordability levers available in this case. Third, the board should scrutinize assumptions where MVP may have selected the high end of what is reasonable, and where MVP has treated cost growth as something it can only pass through. That includes the morbidity impact associated with the expiration of enhanced premium tax credits, pharmacy trend, GLP-1 PMPM, the medical utilization trend, PBM performance, rental network costs, site of care management, and non-GMCB regulated unit cost trend. The HCA is not saying every one of those assumptions is unreasonable, but where the record supports a lower reasonable assumption, the board should choose the assumption that better protects affordability while still maintaining adequate rates. And where MVP points to management tools like GIA or Amwell, the board should ask how many members use those tools, what they cost, and whether they produce measurable net savings. Finally, the board should continue using supplemental orders to require concrete progress on affordability. Last year's supplemental orders addressed provider reimbursement, risk sharing, hold harmless arrangements, code level reimbursement increases, and value from increasing provider payments. Those issues remain live. The board should continue to insist that higher reimbursement and higher premiums produce measurable value and not just higher spending. The broader context matters. Vermont is still in a healthcare affordability crisis. Hospital costs remain the main driver of premium growth. The board has taken bold action in recent years to reduce filed rate increases and to constrain hospital commercial reimbursement growth. That work should be recognized, but the crisis has not passed. Vermonters are still telling the board they cannot pay more. So the HCA's position is not that the board should destabilize MVP. It is not that the board should ignore the fragility of the QHP market. It is that stability cannot mean accepting unaffordable rates year after year. Stability also requires bringing healthier people back into the market, and that will not happen if coverage remains too expensive to buy and too expensive to use. This proceeding will not solve Vermont's healthcare affordability crisis by itself, but it is one of the places where the board can act. And in this moment, with these markets under stress and Vermonters struggling to afford coverage, the HCA urges the board to keep these increases as close to zero as the record will responsibly allow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Okay, Mr. Carnady, please call your first witness.
Thank you, General Counsel. We would call Eric Bachner, please.
Can everyone hear me? Very
Yes,
good. Thank
there
you.
are. Okay, Mr. Bachner, I'm gonna swear you in. Do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give relative to the cause now under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Okay, go ahead. Mr.
Good
Carney.
morning. Good morning, Eric. How are you today?
Doing well, Gary. How are you?
I'm well. Would you please state your full name
Sure. My full name is Eric Bachner.
and who is your employer?
My employer is MVP Healthcare.
And what is MVP Healthcare Plan? Excuse me, what is MVP Health Plan Inc.?
Sure. MVP Health Plan is a not-for-profit subsidiary of the parent company, which is MVP Healthcare.
And that's the filer of these two rate filings this year, correct?
That's correct.
What is your position at MVP Healthcare?
My position is Director, Commercial Markets and Valuation Actuary.
And are you a member of any professional associations?
Yes, I'm an associate of the Society of Actuaries.
And how long have you worked in the health care insurance industry?
I started at MVP in 2013, so I've been in the insurance industry for approximately 13 years.
And of those years, how many were at MVP?
11 of the 13 years.
And what did you do the other 2 years? Did you go on vacation?
No, I was working for another insurance carrier,
What insurance carrier was that?
Cigna Healthcare.
So when did you come back to MVP then? What year?
I came back in 2024.
So how many Vermont rate filings have you worked on over the course of your career approximately?
It's approximately 45.
And approximately how many small and individual and large group filings? How many years have you been doing that?
So out of the 11 years I've been at MVP, it's been 9 of those years I've either been indirectly supporting the Vermont rate hearings or Vermont filings, or actually leading them, as is the case now.
And in terms of leading them, you mean to be the actuary in charge? Is that what you mean?
Yes, I'm the primary actuary in charge of the Vermont rate filings.
And how many years have you done that and testified here?
I think the binders are behind me. My binder graveyard suggests this is the 3rd one.
What are your job duties as the Director of Commercial Market and Valuation Actuary?
Sure. So my primary job responsibility is to be in charge not just of the Vermont small group and individual and large group rate filings, but also our commercial rate filings in New York. So we operate in both states. We operate in all of the commercial markets in both states. So I'm responsible for filing rates for large group experience rated, large group community rated in New York, as well as small group and individual, as well as all of the Vermont rate filings. That's my primary job responsibility. My other job responsibilities include corporate forecasting and reforecasting. So I'm responsible for our commercial portion of our corporate forecasts. And I'm also responsible as the reserving actuary for MVP. So I'm responsible for maintaining all of our IBNR processes.
And are you responsible, with the help of others, of pricing the commercial products that are presented in Vermont?
Yes, that's correct.
And does your work include managing IBNR?
Yes.
And as part of that work, do you review cost drivers in Vermont and healthcare costs?
Yes, I do.
And as part of that work, do you interact with different departments at MVP?
That's also correct.
And what are some of those departments?
The primary ones that I work with are our financial planning and analysis team, our product team, legal, pharmacy, medical management, sort of a broad spectrum of different departments within MVP.
And how about clinical?
Yes, that as well.
And how about marketing?
Yes.
And as I understand it today, MVP is providing evidence in 3 areas. First would be providing your actuarial opinions as an expert, Eric's actuarial opinions, correct?
That's correct.
And those are reflected in the rate filing, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, along with your live testimony today.
Yes.
And then there'll be some other factual information in the rate filing, and other pieces of factual information from other departments of MVP that we've put into evidence already, correct?
That's correct.
So you, on that other information, you're more of a compiler of that information. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's correct. And we've done our best in the filings and in the objection responses to note when a response is prepared by another department and delivered by me, as opposed to being my actuarial opinion.
And that will include our pre-filed testimony, your pre-filed testimony, correct?
That's correct.
And then we have a number of stipulated exhibits that the MVP attorneys will be presenting ultimately, correct?
That's correct.
And each piece of all this factual information that we just reviewed, regardless of the source, could relate to one or more of the statutory criteria, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What I'd like to do is go to the exhibit list, please. And we're going to briefly just acclimate everyone to the exhibits this year that you'll be talking about, okay?
Okay.
Let me know when you're there.
I am there.
Okay, so exhibits 1 through 4, 6 through 17, 19, 40, and 41. These would include MVP's individual and small group rate filings, responses to objections, answers to HCA and board questions, and you've reviewed all of those and are familiar with them and would adopt them as part of your testimony, correct?
Yes, I would adopt them as part of my testimony.
And that would include the confidential references that you heard from the General Counsel earlier in the red boxes, correct?
That's correct.
And then Exhibit 5 is your expert witness disclosure. That's June 4th of 2026. And attached to it is your CV. Did you prepare that disclosure in CV?
Yes, I did.
And Exhibit 18, that's the July 10th, 2026 pre-filed testimony of yours. You've reviewed that and are familiar with it and would adopt it as your testimony, correct?
Yes, I would adopt that as my testimony as well.
And Exhibits 20 and 21 are the July 10th, 2026 Department of Financial Regulation solvency analysis letters. I know you didn't author those, but did you review those and are you familiar with them?
Yes, I have.
And Exhibits 22, 23, and 27 are the corresponding July 10th Lewis and Ellis, the Green Mountain Care Board actuaries, actuarial opinions on MVP filings, and it's July 14th, 2026 pre-filed testimony of Jacqueline Lee. Have you reviewed all of those exhibits and are you familiar with them?
Yes, I have.
And Exhibit 25 is the July 14th MVP affordability template, which MVPs put information in pursuant to the board's direction. Are you familiar with that document?
I am.
Then Exhibit 28 is MVP's updated rate increase summary table. And Exhibit 29 is MVP's Vermont historical rate cut summary. Those exhibits are both dated July the 17th of 2026. And are you familiar with those exhibits and did you help prepare them?
Yes, I did.
And you would adopt those as your testimony, correct?
Yes, I would adopt those as well.
And then Exhibit 34 and Exhibit 39 are confidential January 30th and April 2nd, 2026 MVP supplemental order responses. You reviewed those and are familiar with those responses from MVP, correct?
That's correct.
And again, this year we put little red numbers on the bottom of the exhibits. This year, for whatever reason, they're to the left. So when you and I are talking about exhibits, that have those numbers, some of the larger exhibits, I'll do my best to reference those numbers and would ask you to do the same, please. Okay?
Okay.
So as the general counsel indicated in preliminary discussions, we're going to open this year and we request to go into executive session to discuss information that we believe is confidential, that we relate to contractual proprietary negotiations with hospitals between MVP and the hospitals, and our confidential work on pharmacy. And I would just add that this information these subject matters have already been designated as confidential in our interrogatory responses. And so the testimony would expand upon all of that. So we would ask to go into executive session.
Okay, so board members, like on Monday, I don't think it's technically an executive session because our statute says, notwithstanding the open meeting law, you can discuss confidential information outside of an open meeting. So I think all we need is a motion to move to the non-public session. Would any board member like to make that motion?
I can make the motion. I move that the board move to a non-public session to receive the confidential information that Mr. Carnegie alluded to.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. So the parties, court reporter, board staff, board members, if we could all move over to the non-public session, and Ms. Dawson, if we could go off the record. Thank you.
Yes, it's 8:54 a.m. We're off the record. This is Ms. Dawson. Will you please advise how to move to the other session?
Yes, if you could use that other Teams meeting invite to the executive session.
Okay,
You can leave this meeting and then join that one.
okay, just a heads up, I'll have to exit out of my backup audio and then get back in there as well. So it'll be just a couple minutes.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
Ms. Dawson, are you back? Ms. Dawson, we can go back on the record. And we will resume the public portion of our hearing.
Yes, we're on the record.
Just real quick, can someone activate Mr. Becker's camera, please? And mic.
Yeah, let's just give me a second. I can. Okay, I think I did that. Mr. Becker, are you able to speak?
I believe I am. Thank you.
Great, yeah, we heard you. Okay, if you could just wait a minute, I gotta get my screen sorted out here. All right, I'm sorry. And Ms. Dawson, I don't recall hearing. Are we back on the record?
We are set and ready to go. Yes, we're on the record.
Okay, thank you. Is anybody not ready to proceed? Okay, then, Mr. Carnegie,
Yes, thank you.
go ahead.
Thank you, General Counsel. Mr. Bachner, can you please speak so then I can see you on my screen?
I'm right here.
Okay. Would you please go to Exhibit 19, which is the board questions this year, and go to question 7, please.
I am there.
So this is a question about factors driving large pharmacy spending increases. And then there's a response that follows. Would you talk to the board a little more, expand on this, about the largest drivers of pharmacy trend, a little bit about GLP as well, to provide additional information?
Sure. So the specific question was asking about the large pharmacy spending increases. We identified that pharmacy costs on an allowed basis, so that does not include rebates, not include cost sharing, have increased by over $100 over the past 4 years. The single largest category, particularly from 2024 to 2025, was anti-obesity agents or weight loss GLP-1s. we've obviously, I think that was worth $25 PMPM itself of an increase from 2024 to 2025. Those that increase has somewhat been handled, somewhat been mitigated going into the 2027 filing as the state has moved to remove the coverage for those drugs from the essential health benefit package. We'll talk a little bit about why we still have expense in those categories in a little bit. But all that is to say that that's an expense that we've incurred in 2025. We do not expect to persist nearly as much in 2027. Some of the other categories are ones that we expect to persist, though. The second category that I listed is non-weight loss GLP-1s or GLP-1s that are used to primarily treat and manage diabetes. We've seen a big increase in those, which is, I think, ultimately good for Vermonters if these drugs truly are doing what they suggest that they do. But that is an increase. The other ones that we've seen are particularly specialty drugs. We continue to see increases in specialty drugs, not just in unit cost trends, although that is a part of it, but particularly in utilization trends. So people continue to rely on these specialty drugs, and they're treating more and more conditions, which is sort of this tension that we live in terms of trying to make the rate as affordable as possible while managing all of these other categories that the board has asked us to look at. It's difficult to say to somebody who relies on a specialty drug for a good quality of life that they can't have that drug, or that their access to that drug needs to be limited, but that access comes with an increased cost. I've also highlighted anti-psoriatics as one of the particular categories in which we're seeing that's sort of a subset of those specialty drugs. That's not just to treat psoriasis, but actually to treat psoriatic arthritis, which is just a debilitating condition that causes chronic pain for so many people. And again, it's very difficult to say to someone, this may not be treating a condition and making you get better in the sense of you have a chronic condition that goes away, but for us to be able to say, hey, you're not dealing with chronic debilitating pain, it's hard to suggest to someone that they shouldn't have that, or that is not helping their life in a meaningful way. So we're trying to balance these two affordability lens and this quality of care, access to care lens, but acknowledging that pharmacy costs have increased significantly over the past several years.
Thank you. Would you please go to question number 2 in Exhibit 19 in your response? This question was about what if the CTR changed to 1.5 or 1.0, and the implications of that. And I'd like you to expand on the implications of that as it relates to the RBC.
Sure. So our company doesn't do RBC projections. In New York, our solvency is not done via RBC. It's done via some sort of modified percentage of premium calculation, depending on different lines of business. So we don't necessarily model our RBC out. So when we were asked this question, we suggested that the 2% risk margin is a $9 million contribution to surplus between the two filings. And then we just simply said, how much in a total dollar amount would that be reduced if we went to 1.5 or went to 1? And it's approximately every 0.5% risk margin is worth $2.2 million in projected contribution to surplus in the filing. And to put those in perspective relative to the RBC using the same authorized control level as 2025, that would be worth 7.3%, 5.5%, and 3.6% respectively. So removing any contribution to surplus or decreasing the contribution to surplus does directly decrease our RBC, but it's difficult to say exactly by how much other than sort of imputing that onto 2025.
And is it your opinion that those millions of dollars that you just described are significant?
Yes, it is significant. And the other thing I would highlight with this too is that this is based on membership that we currently have. Our membership continues to grow in Vermont. Now, I don't know whether that will continue for 2027, but these numbers are all dependent on the membership that we have currently. Obviously, in a catastrophic scenario, if the other carrier were to just completely leave the market, then we would have 100% of the membership, and these contribution to surplus percentages would very quickly become much larger in terms of total dollar amount and their impact on the RBC.
Thank you. The next question just below that, it's a detailed question. There's an A, B, C, and then we have a long response. And what I'd like you to focus on is you have references to affordability in your response. There's one generally on page 1, and then there's several references on page 2 in the second and third paragraphs. So I'd like you to expand on that a little bit. The affordability issue that's raised in the context of talking about medical utilization trend, pharmacy trend.
Sure. So this question asks us to identify the 2 rating factors with the largest impact on the proposed rate increases. I highlighted the answer by suggesting that some of the assumptions that we have, for example, medical utilization trend, pharmacy trend, while they are assumptions, they are projections about the future, they are largely dependent on the utilization of healthcare services by members, which we have very little control over. Certainly, we can put in utilization management in place. We can outreach to our members, say, hey, are you getting services at the proper site of care? These types of things. But those are on the margin relative to the overall share of healthcare claim costs that we just are not able to very directly impact. So I did highlight what it would be worth if some of those utilization trends, particularly the medical utilization trend, would be worth. But what we wanted to highlight in terms of affordability is looking at the assumptions and dealing with the assumptions that we have a very direct control over. So the 2 that we highlighted were the risk margin assumption and the administrative cost. We highlighted that the risk margin assumption of 2%, we have direct control over that, and we're balancing affordability and sustainability over the long term when we're taking that into account, when we're setting that target. We did highlight that, but we didn't have the L&E memorandum for 2027 at the point that we made this response, but relying on last year's memorandum, our risk margin assumption was low relative to all QHP carriers nationwide. So we're already taking into account when we're submitting a 2% risk margin, we're already implicitly taking affordability into account, saying there are many carriers who have filed something higher than that, and we are trying to balance affordability with sustainability. We did something similar when we talked about administrative costs. Again, L&E noted that our administrative costs were very, very low historically. I don't have the sentence in front of me, but they said, and I'm going to paraphrase, that our costs were atypically low for an insurer of our size, which made it so that we were managing our administrative costs better than most carriers. So when we're taking account, when we're building our assumption for administrative costs, we truly are taking into account everything that needs to happen in terms of how do we pay our employees, how do we meet all of our financial obligations, how do we pay all of our vendors, how do we maintain all of our systems and our services. But we are taking affordability into consideration there. We noted in our response that we actually, our share of administrative costs relative to the premium dollar is actually shrinking year over year. And the estimate of growth estimate of 4.5% across both lines of business is actually lower than what we've experienced in the recent past. So we truly are attempting to rein in, attempting to maintain, be more efficient in our administrative costs. And that assumption alone, implicitly baked into it, has this notion of affordability.
Thank you. Would you please go to it's item 14, question 14 in Exhibit 19, please. This relates to, well, let me know when you're there.
I am there.
This relates to the safe harbor adjustment for RX benefit, correct?
That's correct.
So would you please expand upon this and explain it?
Sure. So we have to make an adjustment to the federal AEV calculator to account for benefits that are not baked into the AEV calculator when we're saying, does this plan fit within the given metal level regulations federally? But the underlying cause of that safe harbor benefit is that carriers are allowed per federal regulations to make preventive drugs on qualified high deductibles before the deductible. This is something that MVP has done for several years and continues to do in 2027. So the federal government gives the carriers the opportunity to do that, and we are taking advantage of that. So for all of our qualified high deductible plans, for drugs that are considered to be safe harbor drugs, there's a preventive drug list that MVP populates, maintains. Those drugs are covered prior to the deductible on qualified high deductible plans. So it's an opportunity for MVP to help members get their medicine to maintain their current health status, to maintain chronic conditions, and not have an access to care barrier that is having to pay their deductible first.
So this is something that MVP is doing. It's not required by the federal government, correct?
That's correct. It's an opportunity from the federal government, but it is not required.
Okay. And that lowers costs for those particular folks who take advantage of these particular drugs, correct?
It does slightly increase the premium cost overall, but it greatly reduces the cost for the members who need to utilize these drugs and they don't have to hit their deductible before they get them.
Right. The deductible issue is an improvement for them, correct?
That's correct.
I'd like to next have you expand upon our HCA question responses a bit more. If you go to Exhibit 14, please. Let me know when you're there.
I am there.
Okay. The first and second questions reference retroactive termination for non-payment of premium and enhanced APTC expiration. I would ask you to expand upon the response here and explain it to the board what we're talking about.
Sure. So as Mr. Becker alluded to in his opening statement, one of the big impacts to the individual market in particular for 2026 was the enhanced APTC credits were removed from the market and individuals were required to pay a significant amount more of their premium than they were in 2025. We had to make an assumption in our 2026 rates about what this would do to impact the market. That assumption revolves around an increasing morbidity to the market, as Mr. Becker alluded to. Essentially, what's happening is that every individual every year is looking at their coverage and saying, am I getting a benefit for the premium that I'm paying? And what we think when these enhanced APTCs go away is that more members will look at their increased premium relative to the value of their benefits and saying, I will either obtain coverage somewhere else, I won't have coverage at all. And those members tend to be younger, healthier, because if they're receiving a value from their benefit, they're going to continue to pay that premium and to receive that benefit. That, we want to make it clear that wasn't an MVP decision. That wasn't even a state of Vermont decision. That was a decision that's been made at the federal level, and we're just operating within the confines of that. So starting in January 1st, members are now having to pay more for their coverage in the individual market who were APTC eligible. Now, you would think that most people enroll on 1/1. Most people are making that decision right at January 1st, either leaving the market or staying in. The problem is that we're finding is that we're seeing an increase in retroactive terminations, which is when a member signs up for coverage, they say, yeah, I'm going to have coverage, but then I don't pay my premium for several months, and MVP has to go back and say that member no longer actually has coverage for that time period. So all of this to say, it's not as simple as just saying the amount of people that are in the market in January 1st of 2026 will be the expected amount and morbidity of the people in 2027. So we're continuing to see people leave the market rather than just saying I'm outright exiting the market. I'm going to sort of soft leave the market and just not pay my premium for a couple months and have to be retroactive terminated.
Thank you. The next item, number 3, relates to GLP-1 utilization. Would you describe to the board, I think we talked about this a fair amount last year, but where we were on GLP-1, where we are now, and where you're anticipating we're going?
Yeah, so in 2025, I think the single largest contribution to pharmacy trend was weight loss GLP-1. And as a response, that was removed from the essential health benefits. People no longer have coverage in 2027 for GLP-1, specifically clinically for weight loss. Now, you would think that would just mean that all of the costs would go away. Those costs would go to zero. But those specific drugs that are labeled as weight loss GLP-1s actually do have other clinical criteria that people are able to receive coverage for the drug, most notably sleep apnea. I believe it's Wegovy is clinically designated for sleep apnea. So what we did was we had to look at our utilization that has remained in 2026, even after that reduction in coverage has gone into effect. And then we've had to make some sort of assumption about how do we think that that's going to be present in 2027. So we have chosen $4 PMPM for that cost, which is actually a reduction of the trend that we've been experiencing throughout 2026. We do feel like it will level somewhat, but there will still be utilization of these drugs in 2027.
Thank you. Similarly, the next item in Exhibit 14, item 4, relates to the wellness reimbursement benefit. Would you again tell the board where we were, where we are, and what you anticipate in the future as it relates to the wellness reimbursement benefit?
Sure. So prior to a couple of years ago, I believe it was in 2023 was the last year we had this program. We had an older, less developed wellness program on some of our non-standard plans in Vermont where people could get reimbursements, but it was specifically designed for certain items. Over the past couple of years, we've expanded that program. Now, anybody who's on a non-standard plan in Vermont can receive up to $600 per subscriber in reimbursement for items that are not just related to your physical health, but there's a whole range of services that are able to be reimbursed. I think actually elsewhere in the exhibits, there's one exhibit that actually has the categories that are listed. There's things around social, there's things around mind and spirit, and physical as well. So this is a reimbursement that is able and eligible to be received by members who are on our non-standard plans. We do think that it is increasing costs. We do have to continue to increase our premium rates to account for this. But what we found is that this is a significant benefit to our members. It's popular, they enjoy it, and it really does speak to a quality of care that to be honest, can't necessarily be measured just in terms of reductions in medical costs. I mean, people are receiving reimbursement for benefits for things that are truly impacting their life and impacting their health in a positive way that maybe doesn't show up in claim cost PMPM.
Thank you. Would you go to item 6, please, on the next page, I believe.
Okay.
This relates to the catastrophic plan. Would you discuss with the board how there have been changes in the catastrophic plan and the rates and what we need to do this year and why?
Sure. So this is another item that was a decision that was made by the federal government. This was actually done after the rates were approved last year to expand coverage for the catastrophic plan, expand eligibility for the catastrophic plan. So prior to 2026, there was a very defined set of circumstances that would allow an individual to purchase the catastrophic plan. They had to be of a certain age and meet a certain income requirement. And that made it so that the population was very young and healthy, and it was a way for people to get coverage who otherwise would have no coverage at all. Unfortunately, as a result of the federal government's decision-making, individuals now are able to purchase the catastrophic plan who previously were not eligible to purchase it. And that means that the morbidity of the catastrophic plan is essentially the same as any other plan within the market. So what we did this year was we had to remove the catastrophic eligibility factor from our plans. That caused a massive increase in the premium for this plan that is impacting the members that we have. If there becomes stability in this population, if there becomes if we can analyze the population and say, yeah, these people still are healthier than the average population, and there's no risk of everybody flocking to this catastrophic plan, then we would continue to make an adjustment in the future.
Thank you. Now I'd like to go to a couple of the objection responses and have you expand with some testimony on that. If you go to Exhibit 3, which is Objection 1, and then go to page 10.
Okay.
And at the very top of the page, there's a reference to line 15, adjustment for reduction in high-tech imaging prior auth. Do you see that?
I do.
So would you please talk about that further?
Sure. So these sets of lines, these lines in Exhibit 3, are adjustments that we're making to our claim cost to go from the experience period to the projection period that are not explicitly baked into our medical or pharmacy trend assumptions. And this one here this was one that we had last year, and we continued to have it this year because we terminated the agreement in April of 2025. What we did was we had an agreement previously with a vendor to do prior authorization on our high-tech imaging services. So a member would have to go and receive prior authorization before they got an MRI or a CAT scan done, to give two examples. What we found when we analyzed that contract when it was up for renewal was that the amount of administrative cost that it was causing MVP between the vendor agreement, but also members' appeals, MVP having to review some of the determinations to make sure they made sense, that was actually costing just as much, if not more, than the benefit that was being taken in terms of premium rates and reduction to claim cost. So we decided to terminate that agreement. So it's actually increasing the claim cost, as we say, by $1.5 million, but we want to highlight that it's decreasing our administrative cost by at least that much. And that's being taken into account when we're developing our administrative cost assumptions.
And does it have an impact on non-actuarial issues in terms of people wanting to choose their doctor?
Yeah, I mean, this is among the most abrasive item currently. I mean, it's been in the news for the past couple of years. A lot of other carriers, major carriers, are revisiting their prior authorization policies. They're revisiting their utilization management practices to say, yes, there is a reduction to claim costs when we put these things in, but what is the downside to them? How are members being impacted? And not necessarily the dollars and cents, but really trying to understand how are members impacted when these policies go into place. So this speaks not just to the overall cost of care, but really speaks to quality of care and access to care as well. What we're doing when we're removing prior authorization from these high-tech imaging services is we're allowing the doctors to do their job more effectively and allowing the members and doctors to have a closer relationship without MVP getting in the middle in this specific instance.
And one result is less delay in getting that MRI, that image, correct?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Would you please go to Exhibit 6, which is our response to Objection 2, and it's question 11 on page 4. Question 11 on page 4.
Okay, I am there.
And this question relates to administrative allocation methodology between MVP lines of business for this filing. Would you please explain to the board what this is about and how it benefits our members?
Sure. So I've consistently testified over the past 3 years to the board that we manage our administrative costs globally. We say, here's everything that needs to be done by MVP in order to maintain our business, to run our business, to benefit our members. And how do we manage that overall? And we have to take into account every line of business, how much money we're collecting from all the different lines of business. But that overall administrative global cost can be segmented, can be allocated to different lines of business. So we're continually reviewing that, what we call our cost allocation methodology, to say, okay, these services might be better allocated as a percentage of claim cost. These services might be better allocated on a per member basis or call center volume, or these different ways in which we can allocate. So what we've done this year is we've looked at that cost allocation methodology, and what we found is that less overall administrative expense needs to be allocated to the Vermont individual population than we've been allocating in the past. So what we've said is that we need to collect an overall 4.5% more admin than we needed to last year in order to continue to maintain our business, but less of that needs to be collected from the Vermont individual marketplace in total. So we've chosen 2% rather than 4.5% cost increase for individual as a result.
Thank you. And so as to those individuals, it helps on affordability, correct?
That's correct. Yes, we're expecting to collect less admin for individuals.
Okay. Would you please go to Exhibit 18, which is your pre-filed testimony, and go to question 27. Let me know when you're there. It's on page 14.
I am there.
So this is about physicians and our interactions with physicians, correct?
That's correct.
So before I ask you to just expand upon this, I have a narrower question, which is in the confidential section of the proceeding earlier today, you talked about negotiations with the hospitals, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And does MVP have similar negotiations with physician groups that aren't employed by one of the hospitals?
Yes. So the Green Mountain Care Board regulates physicians that are employed by the hospitals, but then we do negotiate separately with physicians who are not subject to the hospital budget process.
Okay, so question 27 asks about physician trends for 2027. Would you please discuss that a bit? And if you could talk about how that relates to where members get their care.
Sure. So we've identified the 3 places that physician trends are really impacted. The first is, as I've said, the Green Mountain Care Board operated physician, or the hospital operated physicians for the Green Mountain Care Board. And then we've segmented our population into physician providers which provide services in Vermont for Vermonters. And then we've segmented the population into everyone else, which is some physicians in New York and New Hampshire, as well as physicians that are covered under our rental network agreement. If you need a physician service in, for example, Boston or Florida, those are done there as well.
And could you explain, just by way of example, if someone needs to get an infusion, they have a chronic, they have Crohn's and they need infusions every 8 weeks or whatever it is. How do they receive that care, and how is that evolving?
Sure. So MVP has done more to contract with both physician infusion services as well as home infusion services. So primarily and historically, members would receive infusion services at the hospital outpatient setting, which is very expensive. You can see as a percentage of Medicare, those services are high cost services. What we found is that members can receive similar care, similar clinical outcomes for cheaper in a physician service setting or even in a home setting. So MVP has actually done outreach to our members who need those infusion services to say, hey, let's review your medical charts, let's review your history in order to determine whether or not physician infusion or home infusion might be right for you. Certainly, we don't want to mandate that a member utilize home infusion when they need to be in an outpatient setting for one reason or another. But we've done our best to try to reduce costs in that way by allowing for the best site of care possible for the member, and that reduces the overall claim expense.
So MVP provides option, but the member decides.
That's correct.
Thank you. I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to try. What is a naturopathic physician? First of all, did I say that right? And then if you could tell us what that is.
Sure. So a naturopathic physician is a non-traditional physician service that relies on other methods and looks at a member's health holistically. So it's not in the within the traditional PCP structure.
And so has MVP done something to recognize that type of physician?
Yeah. So MVP has started a contract with naturopathic physicians in the state of Vermont and is including them to be considered PCPs, which will allow them to receive the cost sharing that is generally better for PCPs than specialists.
Thank you. Would you please go to Q47? It's on page 27. Let me know when you're there.
I am there.
So this is a question about telehealth. Would you please explain and expand upon this question and response, and talking a little bit about the non-actuarial impact of telehealth?
Sure. So MVP continues to utilize telehealth services, continues to promote telehealth services and telehealth utilization in Vermont. And as you said, Gary, and my pre-file testimony says here, there's obviously a financial benefit to having every member utilize telehealth for a service where they would have otherwise gone to, for example, the emergency room. So that's a very direct cost benefit, right? That speaks to overall affordability of rates. But even beyond the affordability, there's this peace of mind that just can't be really expressed in terms of dollars and cents when you're able to, as a young parent, for example, know that you can call a telehealth provider in the middle of the night and say, hey, I don't know what's going on with my baby. Is this something I should be concerned about? Right? Or, hey, my child is having severe ear pain. Is this something that I need to take them to the emergency room? Or is it something that I can follow up with my PCP? Is it something that maybe even you can prescribe antibiotics for that I can go and pick up rather than having to drive half an hour, 45 minutes to my doctor? I live in upstate New York, which is not quite as rural as Vermont, but it can be difficult to get services in certain places, and we recognize that, and it can be even more difficult for members who live in Vermont, having to go 45 minutes, an hour to the emergency room. So any service that we can provide that will better benefit our members and help them to receive the care, the level of care that they need, isn't just more affordable. It promotes a better quality of care, and it promotes access to care in a way that historically hasn't been provided, hasn't been available.
And peace of mind. Yes?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Go to question 48. This is about prior authorization requirements. We talked about this a fair amount with the tech imaging. Would you please expand upon that as it would relate more generally?
Sure. So we gave the high-tech imaging as an example of one where we've identified a prior authorization requirement that we put in place that maybe hasn't had the intended benefit that we were hoping for. I know with Bill H766, the state has done some work to say let's limit prior authorization requirements as well. But even more generally, MVP has taken a look at all of our prior authorization and continuing to look at utilization management as a whole to say, yes, while this may be one way in which we can reduce claim cost, are there other unintended consequences? Are there can we balance both affordability with also these non-actuarial items that the board has suggested that we need to mandated that we need to put in place or consider?
Thank you. If you would go to question 69, please. Would you please expand upon your response about MVP working to support women's health in Vermont?
Sure. So this is a strategy and undertaking that MVP is continuing to undertake, not just in the commercial market in Vermont, but more generally. We really want to try to help. We've identified this population of women that can really benefit from more intervention, not necessarily in terms of telling them how to receive care, but giving them options and giving them the opportunity to navigate their health journey. And when we think of women's health, we think of the very defined period that is childbearing age, right? From about 18 to 35 or 40, let's say. But MVP really wants to focus on the entire spectrum of women's health from very beginning to very end. So we've put into place two particular items in Vermont that are allowing women's health to flourish and promoting women's health here. The first is that we've introduced a doula benefit for 2027. So we're increasing ways in which women who are giving birth can receive care, right? There's been studies that have shown that utilization of a doula can reduce C-sections, can promote after-partum care. We've also put into place, partnered with Electra Health to provide pre and perimenopausal consultations and support. So recognizing that a woman's health journey doesn't just end when she's done having kids. That's quite honestly, in some cases, just the beginning of the rest of her life, and half of her life is spent outside of that range. And so we're working with Electra, who is a vendor that will allow for consultations to be had with a provider via the phone or via telecommunications to be able to provide support, help them understand help them work through what they're going through, provide consultation for other services if they need them, and really support them throughout their entire life.
Thank you. And question 70 goes to supporting individuals with diabetes in Vermont. How is MVP doing that?
Sure. So there are some regulations in the state of Vermont in terms of what cost sharing can be applied for insulin, but MVP has taken it a step further, and we're actually covering in full for members who have received after they've hit their deductible on qualified high deductibles insulin. So we've taken a step that's above and beyond what the state mandates in order to better help members who have diabetes receive their insulin, which can help them manage their care and avoid complications, not just for their quality of life, but also reduce claim costs in the future.
So that's not required by the state of Vermont or the federal government. but coverage of insulin, as you just described it, is something that MVP is doing above and beyond, correct?
Gary, you're breaking up. Hold on 1 second.
As you're checking. Ms. Dawson, could you hear me okay?
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Okay. Can you
you hear
repeat the
me
question,
okay?
please? It's still a little
Sure.
bit lagged, but hopefully it'll.
Ms.
work itself
Dawson,
out,
would
as
you
you said.
mind reading back the question? It was a beautiful question, I think.
One moment. I'm sorry, is my audio, were you able to hear that?
No, I think you're on. No, I was not able to hear it, but you're not on mute.
Okay, one moment. I'm sorry, my software is glitching. Give me just a moment.
You know what?
Hello.
I'll just restate the
Oh,
question.
thank you. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
I apologize for putting you on
No worries.
a task. We were talking about insulin, and you had given some testimony about the coverage for insulin. And my summary question was, so what you're saying is MVP is providing coverage for insulin that's not required by the state of Vermont or the federal government, correct?
That's correct.
We're going above and beyond,
Correct.
and that's good for people who need insulin for diabetes, correct?
That's correct.
Would you please go to Exhibit 25?
Okay, I am there.
This is the affordability templates. I'll identify that MVP has completed its part this year, correct?
That's correct.
And so what generally does the MVP part of this show?
Sure. So MVP is not responsible for the entire template that has been created by the Green Mountain Care Board, is maintained by them. We've simply inserted our premiums and our cost sharing for all of our plans into this. It does show that affordability has decreased slightly in individual, but affordability has increased slightly in small group.
So some parameters are looking better, some not as good as last year, correct?
That's fair.
And does this table represent your opinions or MVP's position on affordability, or is this the board's table and we provided data?
It is the latter. We provided our data. The board has obviously created this, but we don't endorse it as a measure of affordability necessarily.
General Counsel Barber. I've completed the first part of this witness's testimony. The second part would be relating to the filing, and I didn't know if it would make sense to take a brief break now.
Yeah, I think it would. Thanks for pausing. Why don't we take it? It's 10:28 according to my computer. Why don't we come back at 10:40 and resume?
Terrific, thank you.
Okay, we are off the record.
All right, can we take down the graphic? Of the slide? Thanks. And I'm seeing all the participants, but I don't see Dave. Dave, were you on?
He's
Yeah.
here.
Oh, there you are. Okay. So we're ready to go back on the record? Okay,
Yes,
Ms.
please.
Dawson,
Yes, sir.
will you
It's
please go
10
back on the record?
Yes, sir. It's 10:43 a.m. We're on the record.
Thank you. Then Gary, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Eric, could you say something so your screen will come up and I can see you?
Yep, I'm right here.
Let's continue. That didn't work, but I'm sure you look great. I want to segue into particular discussions about the rate filing and the numbers as we typically do each year. Let's start at a high level with the numbers, then we can get into the substance and the outstanding issues with L&E. If you go to Exhibit 1, please.
Okay, I'm there.
And would you please identify the document?
Sure. So Exhibit 1 contains a copy of the SURF submission for all of our rate filing documents, specifically
and-
for individual for 2027.
And looking at the first page, what's the date of that document, please?
Sure. The rates were submitted on May 11th of 2026.
And going to the second page, the left-hand top corner, there's an overall rate impact. What is that number, please?
Sure. The overall rate impact is an increase of 7.82%.
So individual was 7.82. If you go to Exhibit 2, please, and identify the exhibit.
Sure. This is the same exhibit only for Vermont small group for 2027.
And looking at page 1, what's the date of that exhibit?
It was also submitted on May 11th, 2026.
Going to the second page, the top left-hand paragraph, what's the overall rate impact of small group, please?
The overall rate impact was an increase of 9.14%.
Thank you. And then I would ask you to go to Exhibit 28, please. Exhibit 28. Let me know when you're there.
Okay, I am there.
And I think you testified earlier, this is a table that you helped prepare, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll dig down into the details later. What I'd like to focus on is the last column and the two numbers under individual and small group in that last column. Would you please identify those two figures?
Sure. So I believe you mean the last row, Gary. Is that correct?
Last row, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm 61, so you got to cut me some slack.
The last row is our initial rate proposal adjusted for, as it says, the changes in the L&E memorandum, regulatory changes that MVP is requesting, and updated hospital budgets. And those two numbers are an increase of 5.59% for individual and 7.67% for small group.
Okay, so there's a number of adjustments. You start with the initial proposal, which you just testified to, looking at exhibits 1 and 2 of 7.82 and 9.14, correct?
That's correct.
And then we end up with 5.59 and 7.67 on this table, correct?
That's correct.
So those two figures, the 5.59 and the 7.67, is that, as you sit here today, the rate increases that MVP is seeking?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll discuss the details of how we got there in a moment. Would you please go to Exhibit 22, please, which is L&E's actuarial memorandum? Exhibit 22.
Okay, I am there.
Okay, and would you please, this is for the individual rate filing, correct?
That's correct.
And what's the date of the document?
This document is dated July 10th.
And if you would please go to page 22 of that document.
Okay.
And you see a recommendations section,
Yes,
and there's 5 recommendations this year, correct?
that's for the individual market. That's correct.
And then if you go to the next page, page 23, there's a table, and then at the bottom of the table, it says total proposed individual rate changes. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And so it has the individual, the 7.8 that MVP filed, correct?
That's correct.
And then what is L&E's recommended change as of July the 10th?
Sure. As of July 10th, L&E recommended an increase of 6.5%.
So L&E is at 6.5% as of July the 10th. But does that consider the additional information about hospital budgets?
It does not consider additional information about hospital budgets.
And does it consider Blueprint, Vermont Vaccine Purchasing Program, and the Green Mountain Care Board Build Back expense?
No.
You go to Exhibit 23, please. Exhibit 23. And identify the document.
Sure. This is Lewis and Ellis's actuarial memorandum for our submitted 2027 small group rates.
Thank you. And then if you go to page 20 of that document, you see a similar table there to the individual that we just talked about.
Yes.
Okay. And what does it say for total proposed small group rate change?
The total proposed small group rate change was MVP filed 9.1% and as L&E recommended 8.6%.
And again, the L&E figure as of July 10th didn't consider the newer hospital budget information, correct?
That's correct.
Or the Blueprint Vermont Vaccine Purchasing Program or the Green Mountain Care Board Build Back expense adjustments, correct?
That's correct.
Let's go back to Exhibit 22. And those 5 recommendations on page 22. Let me know when you're there.
I am there.
So of the 5 recommendations, do we agree on all of them?
MVP agrees on 4 out of the 5 recommendations and respectfully disagrees on 1 out of the 5.
And which one is that?
That is number 3.
The reduced bad debt assumption?
Correct.
So let's start with the ones we agree on. If you go to the first item on page 22 under recommendations, it says consider updated hospital budget information. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And again, what was the date of this document?
This document was dated July 10th.
And so our original filing of May, was it May 10th? When was our original filing, Exhibit 1?
I believe it was May
12th, May
11th.
12th. May 11th or 12th. Fair enough. Okay. So when the L&E was considering our rate filing, that's what they were considering, that original filing, correct?
That's correct.
And we received additional hospital information since then, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, but going to page 9, please, of Exhibit 22, page 9. See total allowed medical trend.
Yes.
So can you read that first sentence?
Sure. It says L&E believes the 5.5% total allowed medical trend for 2027 is reasonable and appropriate.
And so there they're talking about our original filing data, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we now have budget information, correct?
That's correct.
And do we have it for all the hospitals, or could you explain if we're short one, the impact of that?
Sure. So L&E originally reached out and said that there were several that had delayed submission in their table. We looked on the Green Mountain Care Board website and found all of them except for one. It appears that Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, the submission is either delayed or has not been posted on the Green Mountain Care Board website.
Thank you. Would you please go to Exhibit 40, please?
Okay.
And I'm also going to be referencing Exhibit 41, so keep your finger there as well. On Exhibit 40, this is a July 17th, 2026 response to questions from L&E, correct?
That's correct.
And it relates to hospital budgets in part, correct?
Correct.
And this is for individual, correct?
That's correct.
So would you go please to the second page of the letter and read the response to number 2?
Says the rate impact of the hospital budget submissions according to MVP's interpretation is minus 1.4% on individual rates.
Okay, and then going, so minus 1.4 for individual, correct?
Correct.
Then going to Exhibit 41, same letter, but it relates to small group, correct?
That's correct.
And what's the date of that letter?
The letter is also dated July 17th.
If you go to the second page and read the second response, please.
Sure. The
response to number 2, please.
Yes. The response to number 2 says the rate impact of the hospital budget submissions according to MVP's interpretation is minus 1.1% on small group rates.
Minus 1.1%. Okay, thank you. So if you would go back to Exhibit 28, please.
Okay.
We've got the initial proposal, and then we've got adjusted for agreed changes from the L&E memo, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then we have the last line, just to focus on hospital budgets and what you just testified to. The last row would be a reduction as it relates to hospital budgets, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. So that's hospital budgets. Let's go to the second item. If you go back to Exhibit 22,
Okay.
you recall your testimony. We're first talking about the things that we agreed upon with L&E. And the second item, would you please identify it and explain it?
Sure. The second item is reflect updated risk adjustment transfers. So just to reorient the board around the timing around risk adjustment and what risk adjustment is for. Risk adjustment is put in place in the small group and individual markets so that carriers with worse than average experience can be compensated by carriers with healthier than average experience. Essentially levels the playing field between carriers to make sure both carriers are pricing the same pool of members and one is not has higher rates as a result of having worse experience. That process, the timing of that is for 2025, all carriers submit their data with a couple of months of run out. It's generally in the March to May timeframe. Submit all their data to CMS. CMS does a calculation to determine what the risk adjustment final results will be, and those final results are published on June 30th. So this year we had 2025 data. We made an assumption in our rates about what we thought risk adjustment was. That was based on data provided by Milliman, taking it from both carriers and essentially doing what CMS is doing before CMS does it. And then once we have final results, we would then true up the premium rates to those final results.
Thank you. And if you go to page 14, please, of Exhibit 22. And there's a section on this issue, changes to risk adjustment. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then the third paragraph in that section, would you read the first sentence, please?
It says, actual risk adjustment transfers were published by CMS on June 30th, 2026.
Thank you.
MVP, okay.
So MVP's original rate filing back in May didn't consider this June 30th event, the CMS published transfer amounts, correct?
That's correct. Milliman, when they do their projection, has to rely on data that's not fully complete for the entire year of 2025. They make an assumption about how risk scores might complete over time, and that's what we relied on for the filing. We did not have this June 30th data.
But the June 30th and reliance on the June 30th data you agree with, correct?
That's correct. We would agree with that.
And going back, if you would please, to page 22. Would you read the last sentence in section 2?
The one that starts, this will decrease?
Yes, please.
Yes, this will decrease rates by approximately 0.9%.
And do we disagree with L&E on this?
No, we agree with L&E on this.
And we agree with that rate adjustment, correct? The 0.9?
That's correct.
So skipping over bad debt adjustment, let's talk about reflect HCRP charge and risk adjustment. Would you identify what that is and what the impact here is on the rate this year?
Sure. So you'll see a reference to URRT that impacts both recommendation number 4 and recommendation number 5. This is a standardized rate template that the federal government publishes and requires carriers to populate. States that do not have a rate review program and rely on the federal government to review the rates utilize that. But for states that do have a rate review program, it's just simply to populate the data so that they have, for example, L&E can utilize the public use files for administrative costs and contribution reserves. It's a way to standardize every carrier around the country their data for their small group and individual rates. L&E made a recommendation about where we placed high cost risk pool charges. So high cost risk pool being the program that helps carriers, compensates carriers for members who have over $1 million in claim expense during the experience period. There's a charge that is applied to all carriers to be able to fund that. L&E just disagreed with where we put that factor in the URRT, so it has no impact on the rates, and we agree with this adjustment.
Okay, and that was that 5th item, the reflect positive your issuer CSR payments, correct?
That was number 4, but the same could be said of number 5.
So I got ahead of you. I apologize.
Sure.
Explain number 5 then, and if it has any impact on the rates and what L&E thought about it and what we think about it.
Sure. So we populated one line in the URT with a negative dollar amount for issuer CSR payments. L&E pointed out to us that per the URT instructions, it should be a positive amount. So we agree with that change, and we would fix that for the final URT submission.
And that, in terms of the final rate that is being proposed by MVP, that wouldn't impact that number that we're presenting here today for small and individual, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the one that we don't agree on respectfully, and that would be the bad debt. If you go to page 22, what's the delta in dispute here?
Sure. So number 3 on page 22 says that L&E recommends the bad debt assumption be reduced from 0.75% to 0.47%, consistent with prior experience.
And that'll result in a disputed amount or a decrease in rates of approximately 0.3%.
That's correct.
Okay, go to page 19, please, of the exhibit 22. And you'll see that there's a heading on contribution to reserves, section 12. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And then there's some discussion around bad debt below the table on that page, going into the next page. Do you see all of that?
Yes.
So would you explain the table at the top of page 20 entitled Historical Bad Debt?
Sure. So we provided to L&E during the interrogatory process our bad debt or premium write-offs as a percentage of our premium for the previous 4 calendar years, 2022 to 2025, as well as what it was for year-to-date 2026. And this table just displays those 5 data points along with a straight average of those points.
Would you explain, and I think L&E discusses it in the paragraph below, but would you explain how MVP approached this bad debt analysis and contrast it with how L&E addressed it, and summarize that for the board, please? And
Sure.
Why you think your way of doing it was superior.
Sure. So when we built our premium rates and built our assumptions around bad debt, we did not look at year-to-date 2026 data. We did not have enough of it to really make a determination on that. But what we did note was that it is higher than what we've experienced in the recent past. And so we used 2025 as the basis for our bad debt assumption. we've recognized that due to uncertainty in the market, due to different market forces, we've experienced an increase in bad debt premium write-offs as a percentage of our premium. We feel like this is the new normal in the marketplace, and that it's not a 1-year outlier. So we decided to build in 0.74% of premium in our bad debt assumption. L&E has looked at the data, and they've suggested instead that we should use this average of these 5 data points, which results in an average of 0.47%. That implicitly assumes that 2025 and year-to-date 2026 is an outlier relative to the prior years. And so we should take into account all of the data for that time period.
And why you referenced it, that you believe 2025 and year-to-date 2026 represents the new normal. But can you explain why? Why use those 2 years? What's changed?
Well, particularly in 2026, as I've testified to previously, the enhanced APTCs going away is going to drive an increase of individuals who are sort of feeling out their coverage, deciding whether or not it makes sense for them. It is true also that there's been a tremendous amount of instability in the individual market, even in 2025 as well. So we're recognizing that individuals, I mean, at a certain point, we have to say the data is what it suggests, and it suggests that for whatever reason, people are increasingly signing up for coverage, receiving coverage for a couple of years, and then either having to be retroactively terminated or not paying their premium, and we're left paying their claims.
And that 2025 0.74 historical bad debt reference, that's a significant uptick, isn't it?
Yes.
And the year-to-date 2026, that would be for the first 6 months of data. Is that correct?
It's through
2026?
May of 2026, so approximately 5 months.
Through 5 months of the year. And that year-to-date 2026, what's the number on the table for bad debt?
It's 0.58%.
So that is also a significant uptick from 2022, 2023, and 2024 when things were pretty steady. Fair?
Correct.
So you explained MVP's approach to using these numbers, and you explained L&E's approach. Are both approaches reasonable in your actuarial opinion?
Yes, both approaches are reasonable. I mean, we would use both approaches in different ways depending on what we were seeing in the data. I would not suggest that their methodology is unreasonable.
Okay. But you chose our methodology. Why?
Ultimately, we are the ones who will be at risk for this assumption. And so we felt like 2025 was such a significant jump that we needed to reflect that in the premium rates. And if we were not to reflect that in the premium rates, then we would be short in our premiums an equivalent amount of 0.4% of premium.
Okay. So as an actuary, that was your actuarial judgment in how to take this data and what to use, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you just talked about the issue of risk. So how is using MVP's approach here less risky than using L&E's approach? No offense.
Sure. Well, L&E alludes to it in the way that they organize their memorandum. Contribution to reserves includes both a provision for bad debt as well as a provision for risk margin. So if we were to actually incur 0.74% of premium in 2027 and we did not have that built into our premium rates, then that would directly reduce our contribution to reserve globally by that amount. So MVP did choose an assumption that is more conservative, but we feel like it is more indicative of the reality that we're going to experience in 2027. And if we were to build something less in for premium, there is a real risk that our revenue will be short to account for this bad debt.
Okay. And bad debt, we're looking at the individual filing. Does that relate in our discussion here just to the individual filing, not to small group, and why?
There is a provision for bad debt in the small group filing. L&E took a look at our data. We're not seeing the same significant jump in 2025. That's likely because bad debt is overall in the small group market is lower. Groups tend to pay their premium, most of their premium on behalf of their members. So we don't really see individuals failing to pay their premiums nearly as much in small group. L&E reviewed our assumption that was not significantly different and they had no issue with it.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to Exhibit 23 then and talk about the small group filing.
Okay.
If you go to page 19, you'll note on page 19, there's 3 recommendations. Do you see that?
I do.
It's not 5 recommendations, it's 3, right?
That's correct.
So what are these 3 and what are missing?
Sure. So as we just discussed, the bad debt assumption was not recommended to be changed by L&E. The other one is the CSR change in the URT. And that is because CSR payments do not impact the individual market, or excuse me, the small group market. They only impact the individual market.
Okay, so this year on small group, of the 3 recommendations, we don't necessarily have a dispute, although we don't know where L&E is going to end up on the hospital budget information, correct?
That's correct.
And then outside of the hospital budget information, we don't know what L&E will do with the adjustment we made for Green Mountain Care bill back expense, Vermont Vaccine Purchasing Program, and the cost of Blueprint, right?
That's correct.
In your testimony today about the rate filings, to this point and after, to the extent you're talking about the rate filings, it would relate to both individual and small group unless you're making a distinction, and you'll let us know as you just did here, correct?
Yes, I will do that.
Would you go to Exhibit 24, please?
I am there.
You're fast. Okay, would you identify the document, please?
Sure. So Exhibit 24 is the MVP calculation of Lewis and Ellis's July 10th actuarial memorandum rate impact.
All right, and what's the date of the document?
Document is dated July 13th.
And is this something the board has us do each year to sort of verify the numbers that L&E is suggesting, verify their math, I should say, through our software?
That's correct. Yeah, we're not speaking to whether or not we agree with any of the changes. We're simply taking the recommendations that L&E has given us and say, do we agree that the calculation is the same?
Okay, would you read item number 6, please?
Sure. Item number 6 says, with all of these adjustments, MVP agrees with L&E's calculated new increase of 6.5% for the individual filing and 8.6% for the small group filing, plus any impact from the updated hospital budget information.
Okay, now this document is dated July the 13th, correct?
That's correct.
So that's before we had the hospital information, right?
That's also correct.
Would you go to Exhibit 26, please?
I am there.
Would you identify the document, please?
Sure. So this document is MVP's July 14th supplemental pre-file testimony of myself, read the notice of disagreement with L&E.
And what's the, I think you said the date, but would you mind saying it again?
Sure. It's July 14th.
Thank you. And then would you please go to question 6, please, in this response?
Okay.
And question 6 relates to the individual actuarial memorandum of L&E, correct?
That's correct.
And would you read the answer, please?
It says MVP's requested average rate increase for the individual filing of 7.8% is decreased by 0.9% for a modified total average rate increase request of 6.8% by MVP, plus impact of the hospital budgets.
So that shows MVP's agreement as the individual on L&E's recommendations, except for bad debt, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and go up to question 5 and read the answer, please.
Sure. MVP's requested average rate increase for the small group filing of 9.1% is decreased by 0.5% for a modified total average rate increase request of 8.6% by MVP, plus impact of the hospital budgets.
Thank you. So would you go back, please, to Exhibit 28?
Okay.
the second row where it says adjusted for agreed changes from L&E memo. Do you see that?
Yes.
So that's the two numbers that we just talked about a moment ago in the notice of disagreement, right? The 6.82 and the 8.59. Those are the figures you get to if you adopt L&E's suggestions except for bad debt.
That's
Correct?
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So that aligns with the notice of disagreement, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I want to ask you about a couple of issues in the individual memorandum. Would you please go to Exhibit 22, page 11, Section 4. This is the heading is changes to population morbidity adjustment. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
Okay, we've talked about some of these issues earlier in your testimony. I'd like to focus on, maybe you could bring me to it. There is a reference by L&E to MVP could even use higher assumptions. Do you have that in mind, and could you direct the board to that?
Sure. I believe it's down at the bottom of page 12, the last paragraph.
So would you, that would be, read that first sentence so we can see if we're at the same spot.
Sure. It says, given the actual market lapse observed through April 2026 and the Wakely estimated lapse for 2026, L&E believes a higher lapse assumption could be justified.
So I think you heard, and I don't remember exactly where Attorney Becker said it. It might have been in his opening, but he talked, I think it was in his opening, a little bit about assumptions and MVP using the highest assumption in some cases. That's the gist of it, if I remember it right. What is being said here?
Sure. So what's being said here is that L&E has reviewed the assumptions that we've put in place for the expiration of the enhanced APTC subsidies, and they've noted that a higher lapse assumption could be justified given the external data that we have provided.
Thank you. Would you please go to Exhibit 29? And would you, when you're there, let me know and please identify the document.
Is it the MVP historical rate cut summary document?
It is. Do you see that?
Yes.
And this is a document that MVP prepared last year, and you've updated it with some additional, more recent data, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like you to walk the board through each column and just identify the column.
Sure. So as you said, Gary, just to orient around the table, the first column lists the time period and the market, which for 2021, the market was combined. The other years, we've provided small group and individual broken out separately. What we've done from the previous year was to fully complete 2025 actual data, along with provide what is our latest available budget estimates for 2026. So you now have in front of you 5 years of complete claim and premium information and 1 year of projection. The second column is the MVP proposed contribution to reserve. So that was what we had proposed in the rate filing. The following two columns are the overall cuts proposed by L&E and the additional overall cuts by the board. So the first of those two columns is cuts that were proposed by L&E in their actuarial memorandum that we did not explicitly agree to at the rate hearing. And the second column is additional overall cuts by the board. Those were cuts that L&E did not recommend and MVP did not agree to at the rate hearing, but that the board cut in addition to those. The next column is a total, sorry, go ahead.
I just said thank you. Continue.
Okay. The next column is a total premium allowed by the board. So that's just the premium that was collected as a result of the rates that the board approved for that given year. The following column is listed as losses, although it could more clearly be labeled gains/losses. Losses here are shown with a negative amount. So negative $3.8 million in 2025 small group, whereas positive numbers would indicate a gain for that given year. The following two columns are the L&E cut impact and the board cut impact. Those are just taking the columns that were over to the left and translating them from a percentage of premium to a total dollar amount. And the total dollar impact of a rate cut, the next column is just a summation of those two columns. The final column is losses without cuts. That just takes the losses column and subtracts out. So effectively adding in the impact of the rate cuts to show the losses or gains without those cuts.
Thank you. And this Exhibit 29 was filed on July the 17th, correct?
That's correct.
And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, it says 2026 based on latest available budget estimates, correct?
That's correct.
And that's accurate, correct?
Yes, we have. So we do a corporate reforecast just around this time. And so those 2026 numbers reflect actual claim data and actual premium received for 2026 through June, as well as a projection for claim expense for revenue for the second half of the year. But I would note that there's a big assumption in those, which is risk adjustment, which we don't have any information on and will not till at least December when Milliman does their annual risk adjustment simulation for the carriers.
Okay, thank you. And so first, looking at that third column, overall cuts proposed by L&E. L&E did not propose cuts in the last 3 years, correct?
That's correct.
And the board, next column, didn't propose cuts in the last 2 years, correct?
That's correct.
So would you provide some detail on this first, I guess it's not first 6 months, it's through May of this year, 2026, and describe the first quarter and claims and what you're seeing in more recent time?
Sure. So what we've identified emerging in 2026 is medical claims in particular were very low for the first quarter of 2026. We've noticed that in our MVP data, so we were trying to dig into what exactly that is, why that's happening, whether we expect that to persist throughout the rest of the year. That's not just an MVP thing. It's a state of Vermont thing. Vermont DFR had reached out to MVP asking whether they had seen it and suggested that some of the hospitals were seeing much lower utilization than they expected in the first quarter. And it's not just a state of Vermont thing either. We've noted from listening to public carrier earnings calls that most health insurance carriers experienced lower than expected claims for the first quarter of 2026. So for whatever reason, nationwide, effectively, we've seen a lowering of healthcare cost trend for the first quarter of 2026. Now that begs the question of whether we think that that is going to persist throughout the rest of the year, or whether we expect it to come back to somewhat of a normal level. In our 2026 corporate forecast, we expected somewhere in the middle. We assumed some of that utilization reduction in the first quarter would persist throughout the rest of 2026, but largely we expect that the first quarter was an outlier and will come back to historical averages for the rest of the year.
So since that first quarter, you've seen a pickup in claims?
Yeah, that's correct. So as I stated previously in my testimony, my job is also to review the IBNR models for the entire company. And we've seen that pretty much across the board, both in Vermont and New York commercial, but also in some of our other lines of business where claims are starting to pick back up, particularly for April and May of 2026.
But at least in part because of that first quarter, it appears it's trending differently now. There's a lot of uncertainty for 2026. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, that's definitely a fair summary.
What actuarial conclusions would you draw from this table, Exhibit 29, reflecting data about trends and losses for MVP?
Sure. So the biggest conclusion that I would draw from this is that we experienced persistent and sustained losses from 2021 through 2024. And then since the time period that you noted, Gary, of the past 2 years and 3 years where the board and L&E did not propose explicit cuts, we've seen that moderate and stabilize. And we'd like to thank the Green Mountain Care Board for recognizing that and allowing us to sort of get out of this hole of persistent losses. But I do want to note that to me, this indicates that we're not necessarily out of the woods yet. We don't want to be celebrating and thinking that we are making money hand over fist in this market. I do want to note that for 2026, our projections, though they are gains of $0.8 million in the small group market and $2.6 million in the individual market, that is actually lower than our proposed contribution to reserves for that time period. So you can see, just to give an example, in the individual market, we have projected revenue of $203.1 million. And so a $2.6 million gain is somewhere in the 1.3% margin range. So it's great that we're making money, and we would like to continue to do so in order to support our business for the long term. But we do want to note that this is still underneath what we had expected and have built into premium rates.
And there's a lot of uncertainty